She had the seat. She had the ticket. But somehow, she didn't look like she belonged. A dress too simple. A face too bare. A silence mistaken for weakness. The glances turned sharp. The words, polite but poisonous. One by one, they stripped her of dignity, publicly, perfectly. But when judgment was almost complete, the door opened. And with it came a reckoning no one saw coming. Stay. This isn't just a flight. It's a battle for worth. The scent of citrus-scented disinfectant clung faintly to the cool, recycled air of the first-class cabin. Polished brass trim gleamed under the soft amber lights, and the plush seats, wider than some Manhattan studio apartments, stood like thrones in perfect rows. Ivy Quinn stepped through the partition, as if she didn't belong there. Not because she didn't, but because everyone would assume so. She was 39,000 feet away from her comfort zone. Her dress, a soft ivory slip with clean lines and no visible logo, hugged her figure with understated elegance. The kind of elegance money didn't scream, it whispered. Her hair, naturally wavy, was pulled back in a loose tie, a few strands escaping to frame her delicate, makeup-free face. No designer sunglasses. No diamond necklace. Just her. And that was the problem. Around her, the cabin bloomed with status. A woman in the aisle seat was holding a Hermes Birkin like a trophy. A man just ahead had draped a Burberry trench over the headrest as if to let it breathe. There were Rolexes that caught the light like knives. Heels that had never touched sidewalk concrete. Perfumes more expensive than Ivy's entire outfit. Still, she held her ground, literally. In her hand, a pristine first-class boarding pass, Aurora Airlines Flight 937, Seat 2A. She held it with care, like it might crumble if mishandled. Not because it was fragile, but because everything else around her felt that way. Fragile. On the verge. She took a breath. One step forward. Don't flinch. Keep your shoulders back. The flight attendant in the corner barely glanced her way. The murmur of conversation continued. The clink of a glass. Someone laughed, a deep, throaty chuckle, the kind that said, I know I'm important and I don't care that you know too. Ivy moved down the aisle slowly, her heels muffled against the carpet. Passengers didn't look up. They didn't have to. They sensed her. A presence that didn't match the decor. An anomaly. She arrived at seat 2A, her name printed in crisp black ink on a small folded card atop the armrest. Ivy reached out, gently brushing it with her fingers. She was about to sit down. And then, a shadow fell across her. Just as Ivy was about to lower herself into seat 2A, a figure stepped sharply into her path. Click. The sound of polished heels halting with authority. Camila Lauron. At 34, she wore her role like armor. Aurora's signature navy uniform fit her like a second skin, the silver wings pinned neatly above her heart gleaming under cabin lights. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight, impeccable bun, not a strand out of place. Every line on her face seemed drawn with precision, cheekbones like blades, lips perfectly painted in a crimson that whispered, I don't make mistakes. Her eyes locked on Ivy like a scanner, starting at the low bun, the simple dress, the absence of makeup. No designer tag. No obvious wealth. Just neutral elegance. Too neutral. Excuse me, miss, Camila said, voice crisp, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. You might be in the wrong cabin. This is first class. Her words were polite, but the implication wasn't. It was as clear as the designer heels resting beneath the next row. You don't belong here. Ivy didn't bristle. She didn't look away. Instead, with quiet composure, She opened her handbag and took out the boarding pass, perfectly flat, perfectly valid, and held it out with a calm hand. "I'm not mistaken," she said evenly. "This is my seat." Camila stared at the ticket, then slowly took it using only the very tips of her fingers, as though avoiding contact with something sticky. She brought it close to her face, not because she couldn't read it, but because she couldn't believe it. Seat 2A. Ivy Quinn. Still, her expression didn't soften. "There must be a system error," she said, letting out a quiet, skeptical chuckle. "This happens from time to time. I'll look into it." She said it like she was doing Ivy a favor. Like she was humoring a child who had wandered somewhere she shouldn't be. Then, without returning the ticket, Camila turned and began tapping briskly on her tablet, each movement sharp, deliberate, almost irritated. Ivy remained standing beside her seat, the back of her neck prickling. Not from shame, but from the slow, creeping heat of something she knew all too well. Quiet humiliation, dressed up as protocol. But she didn't move. She didn't back down. Not now. At first, the reactions were subtle. A flicker of movement behind a glossy copy of the Wall Street Journal. The low rustle of silk as a woman crossed her legs with a sharp, practiced motion. Then, the silence shifted, not the polite quiet of a luxury cabin, but the heavy, expectant pause of an audience sensing drama. A man 2 rows over lowered his newspaper with theatrical timing. Salt and pepper hair, a crisp pinstripe suit, and a watch that probably cost more than a down payment. He adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning Ivy like a customs officer assessing contraband. "Happens all the time," he muttered, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. A smirk crept up his face. First class gets confused with economy more often than it should these days. A few passengers chuckled under their breath. Not kindly. Across the aisle, a well-dressed couple leaned toward each other like gossiping schoolchildren. The woman, wrapped in a tailored Chanel blazer, covered her mouth with perfectly manicured fingers, but her voice was sharp and clear. "She probably won some promotional ticket," she whispered. "Or begged for an upgrade. You can tell by the dress." Her husband let out a snort. "That dress," he scoffed. "I think my tie costs more than her entire outfit." Ivy heard every word. She didn't flinch. But inside, something twisted, tight and sharp like a needle slowly turning beneath the skin. Camila returned then, holding the tablet like it contained a verdict. Her expression was the perfect imitation of concern, but her voice betrayed her. "Unfortunately, I'm still not seeing confirmation in our active system," she said, her tone honeyed but hollow. "I'll check if there's a more appropriate seat available for you toward the rear of the plane." She said appropriate like it was code for your kind. Ivy's eyes dropped briefly to her wrist. The silver watch gleamed beneath the cabin light, a quiet symbol of the life she shared with a man powerful enough to own the jet, not just ride it. Her fingers curled around it instinctively, grounding herself. When she looked up again, her voice didn't shake. "I don't need another seat," she said clearly. "This one is mine." A few seats away, someone coughed. Another passenger exchanged a look with their companion. But no one said a word for her. Only silence. And judgment. Camila stood perfectly still, one manicured hand resting on her hip, the other gripping her tablet like it was a badge of judgment. Her eyes didn't leave Ivy, not even for a second. Then, without a word, she turned her head slightly and whispered something to a tall man standing just inside the cockpit curtain. The cabin manager. He was in his 40s, sharply dressed, with the posture of someone used to taking control. A glinting name tag read Bryant. His expression didn't betray much, neutral, unreadable, but the way he adjusted his cufflinks before stepping forward spoke volumes. He approached Ivy with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Quinn," he began, voice calm, but laced with firm authority, "we're encountering a discrepancy with your reservation in our system. I'm going to have to ask you to step off the aircraft briefly so we can clear up the confusion." The words hung in the air like a sentence passed down. Ivy froze. Her fingers tightened around the armrest. Her heart thudded once, loud enough in her ears to drown out the soft engine hum. Then came the feeling again, that slow flood of heat crawling up her neck. But this time, it wasn't shame. It was fury. Caged and silent. She scanned the cabin. Every pair of eyes was on her now. Some feigned disinterest, looking past her while clearly watching. Others didn't bother hiding it, faces turned fully toward her, mouths curled into slight smirks, eyes glittering with smug delight. Like they were watching a scene written just for their entertainment. There was no kindness in that room. No recognition. No ally. Camila stepped closer now, arms crossed, chin tilted just enough to make her smugness look polished. "We have procedures to follow, Miss Quinn," she said, her voice smooth but sharp as a razor. "Surely you understand." Ivy looked between them, Camila with her false concern and coiled superiority, the manager with his cold efficiency, the rest of the cabin drinking in her humiliation like wine. She didn't move. Not yet. But something in her eyes shifted, hardening. She wasn't just a woman being dismissed. She was a storm waiting for the wrong person to speak next. The tension was razor thin. One more word, one more breath, and it might snap. Then, with a soft hiss, the cabin door reopened. Every head turned. Knox Wilder stepped into the first-class cabin. He didn't need an introduction. His presence announced itself. Towering, immaculately dressed in a midnight black Tom Ford suit that hugged power like a second skin, he looked like he owned not just the plane, but the sky itself. His hair, slicked back, gleamed under the cabin lights. Cold confidence radiated from every step he took. And with him came silence. The kind that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. Every conversation died mid-sentence. The rustling of newspapers stopped. Even the overhead chime seemed to cut itself short. Knox's eyes moved swiftly across the room, landing on Ivy, still standing, surrounded, cornered. His jaw clenched. "Ivy." His voice was low. Smooth. Measured. But behind it, danger, barely restrained. "What exactly is going on here?" Camila jerked upright, like she'd been electrocuted. The cool arrogance that had draped her all morning drained in an instant. "Mr. Wilder, sir, I wasn't aware that." Her voice cracked as she stepped back, face paling, tablet trembling in her hand. Knox didn't spare her a glance. He walked straight to Ivy's side, his hand settling protectively on the small of her back. Not just as a gesture of comfort. It was a statement. "She's mine." He turned slowly to face the silent crowd. And then, to Camila. "Someone questioned my wife's seat." His voice dropped an octave, sharp as a blade. "Would you care to explain why she was being publicly interrogated?" Camila's lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked like she might shatter. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence after Knox's question wasn't just awkward, it was exposing. The kind that made people hold their breath, afraid even the sound of blinking might be too loud. Then, a voice, soft but sharp as a needle, whispered from the third row. "Wait. Do they know each other?" Camila stiffened. Her fingers clenched the edge of her tablet so tightly her knuckles went white. Knox turned to her then, his eyes no longer cold, but disappointed. And somehow, that hit harder than rage ever could. "It's sad, really," he said, voice low but clear enough for the whole cabin to hear. Back then, you couldn't see potential when it stood right in front of you. And now? He glanced toward Ivy. You still can't recognize the worth of an extraordinary woman. The words landed like a gavel, final, public, irreversible. Camilla's breath hitched. And just like that, the years she'd worked so hard to bury clawed their way back to the surface. Late nights in cheap cafes. Knox, younger, sleeves rolled up, full of impossible dreams and restless ambition. And her, beautiful and sharp, but always scanning the room for someone better. Someone richer. So when that someone came along, she walked away, without a backward glance. She never thought she'd see Knox again. Certainly not like this. I didn't know, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't realize. But it was too late. The past had already caught up. And this time, it had a front row seat. Camilla stood frozen. The cabin had become a courtroom. And Knox Wilder, unshakable, composed, was the one delivering the sentence. He turned his gaze to the cabin manager, his voice now a blade cloaked in velvet. Camilla Lauron, he said coldly, will be the first to undergo Aurora Airlines mandatory anti-discrimination training. Effective immediately. No one dared breathe. Camilla's face went ghostly pale. The carefully curated arrogance drained from her like air from a punctured tire. Her hands dropped to her sides. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Because everyone had seen it. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Justice had been served in silence, and it was deafening. Knox then turned back to Ivy, and the storm in his expression softened instantly. The shift was visible, almost tangible. His hand reached for hers, warm and steady. I don't love you because you're my wife, Ivy, he said gently. I love you because you're you, smart, fierce, and grounded in a world that's lost its mind chasing status. Ivy's eyes flickered, caught between emotion and clarity. Not tears, but realization. All those stares. All the whispers. None of it mattered anymore. She smiled, soft, luminous, unshaken. I think, she said, voice steady, it's time to start a new chapter. And in that moment, she wasn't just the wife of a billionaire. She wasn't a headline, or a mistake in someone's system. She was Ivy Quinn. And they all finally saw her. As the plane settled into the quiet again, and Knox guided Ivy gently into her rightful seat, a single message lingered in the air, one no one would forget. Never judge by appearance. Because some people walk in quietly and leave as legends.